Hey, welcome. Thanks so much for joining me today. And I wanted to dive in and talk a little bit about, what's the state of leadership today in this market, in this industry, and what leaders are truly facing. So there's an increased amount of leaders who are facing greater uncertainty around situations within the market, priorities that are continuing to shift, team, the state of mental health, motivation, drive, worry, anxiety, all of these different things that come up both for leaders and their teams. And it's making it incredibly tricky for us to then really spend time on all of the important aspects of leadership, how we communicate, how we set aside time, how we reflect, how we lead, right? How is it that we are innovative and thinking about all of the things that the corporation needs, let alone our individual team members? And so in this shifting economy and industry, it's important that we start to consider what are some things that we can do to help ease the stress, ease the load, create greater safety internally for ourselves and for our teams. So I wanted to talk a little bit about this today because it's definitely ever present. It continues to come up in conversations that I'm having with various leaders in the industry when people are stating that they're struggling to find the right time, the motivation, all of the drive that they felt that they had before in their leadership. And then let alone, how do they start handling some of the changes that are starting to happen? We used to be very concerned about how do we motivate teams from a remote setting. Now we have an increased return to work policy that, we're starting to face, and this idea of coffee badging and what does that look like and how are we supposed to monitor all of this as leaders? And so number one, I want to mention that there is nothing that we can control on our own. And that might sound a little bit strange, but as leaders, sometimes we have this propensity to take on the corporation's problems, the world's problems, our team's problems, let alone having our own that we're juggling. And so I want to encourage you first to state that the only thing that we can do is show up in the best way that we can. And it's our responsibility to be that person, to be present, to be able to navigate these various challenges and be resilient and adaptable as we're moving our way and charting new courses, because that's the only way that we're going to continue to rise up and truly thrive and help our teams to truly thrive as well. And so while all of these things are happening, it does beg the question, what is the state of leadership development then? What is the state that leaders are in, and how are they devoting their time to the right things? I've had more clients recently tell me, I'm just struggling to be able to find the time for personal development, for personal growth, while trying to juggle with my team. And so I wanted to just kind of lean in a little bit and tell you that the greatest way that you can do this is really to pour back into yourself. You need to nurture yourself. We are not able to be very good for anybody if we're spending all of our time focused externally and putting ourselves last. Now, I know when I used to lead my team and I would spend late nights and I would try to take on more so that I could be that buffer for them and I could protect them. And I had to learn over time that we truly were a team. See, the team is there for each other. And I know that every leader cares deeply for their team. They care deeply for the individuals that are working with them. They don't want to burden them. They don't want to overwhelm them sometimes. And then when we start to ask more, it can lead to incredible anxiety because we're afraid to do so. We're afraid to burden them or ask for that. And so what are ways that we can start to do this? Well, number one, when we start to pour personal development back into ourselves, we are able to show up with greater clarity, with greater commitment, with greater purpose. And so when we're looking to create that intrinsic motivation, that internal drive amongst our teams, amongst the organization, it has to start first with us, leading by example. We can't say to our team members to either work extra hours or not work extra hours if we are doing the opposite. So we have to lead by example, but we also need to create healthy boundaries, healthy balance. Now, I've heard many times where it says there's no such thing as work-life balance. But what there is a greater respect for ourselves, a greater understanding that when we take 15 minutes, we are pouring back another hour into our day of productivity. When we drain ourselves and deplete ourselves, we are not any more productive just because we're sitting at our desk. We're not any more productive. So why not instead think of different ways that you can start leaning back into taking that little 15-minute break, going on a little walk, waking up maybe a little bit extra early to just spend some time in reflection. Spend some time either in meditation or prayer or whatever it is that you can do to start filling your cup back up. It's a remarkable difference that it can make when we just spend an extra 15 minutes nurturing and caring for ourselves. And that's probably the biggest thing that I end up talking to people about because they're too busy. And because they're so drained, it's the opposite of what we really want to do. What we want to do is sleep a little bit longer. We're not really looking forward to going into the office. We're not really looking forward to having to deliver some difficult news potentially. So we deprive ourselves. But if we can start to think about how do I find pockets of time? How do I find moments where I can start introducing little things, little ways to make this possible? Now, isn't this the main problem that we face? Isn't it? Because if we have a day that is chock full of meetings and we barely have time to go to the bathroom or to eat, then it's really hard for us to consider how is it that I'm going to find any amount of extra time to do what you're telling me. And I have this conversation all the time. And I get it. I totally get it. But if we don't find it, it will never appear. It will never appear. So we have to be deliberate and make it. And so what are some different ways that we can do that? Well, like I mentioned, you can wake up a little bit earlier. 15 minutes, wake up a little bit earlier. Sneak somewhere quietly and go spend some time with yourself. Do that in the evening. Find some little time. Go on a little walk after work, alone with no other audio, no podcast, no meeting going on in the background, nothing else. Allow some clarity to clear the clutter away in your mind. Be and sit with your thoughts, because the more that we enable our brain to do this, the better. What's another one? If you drive and you're commuting into work, take another 10 to 15 minutes to drive in silence. We are so busy shoving more and more data and information into our brains that we do not allow our brains to process. Our brains are like a machine, but they also need rest. They need to recharge. That's how we get creative, innovative ideas. And so if we're not allowing for these things to happen, what we're doing is over time, it's just depleting more and more and more of ourselves and expecting more and more and more of ourselves in return, which is not an equation for success. 94% of companies believe that leadership development is critical for success. And only 15% of leaders feel that they are adequately prepared to lead. That's a study by Deloitte. So if only 15% of leaders feel like they're adequately prepared to lead, and yet 95% of companies feel that leadership development is important, where does it fall for you? that should be an indicator that it is important for you to be able to take this time. Now, I'm right now talking about personal care and personal development and being able to sit with your thoughts, because we also aren't able to learn and to grow if we first don't make room. Our brain is spending a lot of time filling up space. And sometimes, in order to kind of break bad habits, we have to replace it with starting, with good habits. And so it's not that it just clears away. It's that we have to start over time doing a replacement within our mind. And the more that we can do that, the more that we can start with simple habits, the greater it becomes to find other pockets of time where we can actually grow and learn. We have more leaders who are investing in coaching than ever. So 25% of senior executives and 37% of high potential leaders invest in coaching or are part of some personal development and coaching plan specifically. It's important because now as coaches, we help you be a thinking partner. We can't think through and process all of our decision making on our own sometimes. We get in our own way. We create blockers and barriers and blind spots. We have gaps of knowledge. And we also prevent ourselves from moving forward. Sometimes we get stuck in our own way because for some reason we think it's not possible, it can't be done. We don't have enough time. We think of all of the negative reasons why we can't do something. And so that's what coaches help with. They help to challenge some of those assumptions, some of those biases, the things that are hidden to ourselves, so that we can start to rethink how we can then make that time. Which then leads into, how do we truly lean into our teams? How do we become their partners? Not their leaders, their partners. That's what we're there to do. We're there to partner with them and to help them to succeed and help them to grow. And there's a multitude of ways that we can do that as leaders, but most simply, how do we lean into them and how do we ask for help? How do we ask, hey, can you take this extra piece on? What is it that you need for additional support? Not that I can do all of it for you, but what do you need for support? And that can be also done for meetings. And how are you helping them to grow in their own leadership as well if you're taking it all on? Sometimes we think that us carrying the entire load is helping, when really what it's doing is stunting their growth. And I know that's not what we want. So we have to create balance, and that's about getting to know our teams, getting to know their strengths, their weaknesses, the things that truly light them on fire. Getting to know them so well that we understand when we're giving them something that they would absolutely love to do, that maybe we don't really enjoy. It also helps us to recognize so much more about our team. But if we don't take the time to get to know them because we're so busy running from meeting to meeting to meeting to meeting, then it's going to be really a lot harder for us to ask for that help. It's going to be a lot harder for us to know how to lean into them. It's going to be a lot harder for us to know where our team is at. And so taking it beyond one-on-one meetings, going beyond that, use that time in a way that's incredibly deliberate, but also empowering for your team members. Oftentimes when I'm hearing about one-on-ones, it's a status update. They might have some questions. But when you become a coaching leader and you can really partner with individuals on your team and help them to think through some of their problems, now you're helping them to rise up and lift up, and you can be the person that helps them with their career trajectory. But it's hard for us to do all of this when we feel like we just don't have any time. So how do you make the time? How do you start thinking about that? And it has to do with you. It has to do with where you start. It has to start doing with your core values and how you prioritize yourself. There was an article that came out, I think it was by Forbes a couple weeks ago. The no leader is a successful leader. When we're so busy saying yes to everything, we are saying no to something. So what are you saying no to in order to say yes over here? Has people pleasing gotten in the way of true growth for yourself, for your team, and for your organization? We have to sometimes be that thinker, that stop, that logical person to create space and really question, why are we doing this? Is this leading to something greater? Because if it's impacting you and it's impacting your team and it's impacting your ability to really see through the projects that you have been asked to see through, that's where it starts to become a real question. Is this moving us forward in strategic planning and initiatives that have been put in place? How is this furthering our mission? And those are big questions that companies are looking to from leaders. Those are the true questions. We can't always be yes people. Sometimes we have to be challengers of the status quo. So as you're thinking about the different things that you're facing in your industry today and what's being asked of you as a leader, first I want you to think about, number one, how are you preparing yourself? It's hard to be resilient. It's hard to be strong when we feel weak. And how do we combat that? We pour back into ourselves. Personal development, alone time, thinking time. We need it. Second is really getting to know our teams and knowing what's appropriate to ask from them. How do we partner with them? And how do we lean into the team in a greater way? This is supporting and helping to grow our team. And thirdly, how are we challenging the status quo? How are we standing up and saying, is this the real direction that we want to go? Is this meeting truly necessary? Do I need to attend this, or can someone else attend in my place? Finding ways that you can operate in a manner that feels like you're moving forward so that you can start looking, where are those pockets of time? Where are those places for you to pour back into yourself, your leadership development, ultimately so that you can help to grow your team? If you're curious about how you can make this a little bit more possible for yourself, how you can think through some of these, because you're probably sitting there going, I still don't see how this is going to be possible for me, then I encourage you to reach out. Let's have a talk about that. Let's see, truly, how do we make it possible for you to become the leader that you truly want to be, the desire to be, even in this changing market? Thanks so much for joining me today. I hope that you have a very successful, productive, and peaceful week.